It has been hailed as one of the greatest feats of diplomacy and multilateral relations in history, yet the Iran nuclear deal, also known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, has seen how a quest for peace and security can be foiled by a single actor in a global theater. This is the JCPOA in a nutshell. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or the JCPOA as it is commonly known, was signed on July 14th, 2015. Proudly standing shoulder to shoulder were the foreign ministers of Iran, the P5+1 countries comprising of Russia, China, France, the United Kingdom, the United States, Germany, and the European Union. The deal was designed to reduce the US-led punitive economic sanctions on the Islamic Republic of Iran in exchange for guarantees surrounding Tehran's peaceful civilian nuclear program. Whilst lauded as a huge diplomatic success story, the famous family photo taken on the stage in Vienna did not happen overnight. The JCPOA was born over a two-decade period in which the Islamic Republic of Iran opened its doors to diplomacy in spite of external pressure from Washington and the Israeli regime, the latter of which coincidentally have no role in the talks. In the early 2000s, Iran held high-profile talks with the so-called EU3, consisting of France, Germany, and the United Kingdom. However, discussions failed to materialize into a deal, fueled again by a weak-appearing Brussels bowing to US demands. Following the initial agreement in Vienna, several key stages of the deal began to occur, each with their own significant milestones attached. On October 18, 2015, after careful legislation and due diligence was undertaken, Adoption Day was introduced, which saw the EU implement the legal framework required to end nuclear-related economic and financial sanctions placed on Tehran. January 16, 2016 became the next major landmark date of the deal, known as Implementation Day, and came about following the International Atomic Energy Agency confirming Tehran had fulfilled its commitments to the deal. UN and US-imposed sanctions on Iran were also eased. However, in spite of the progress made, events in Washington would soon change the dynamics of the deal. As with any diplomatic negotiation, the tables were designed to be balanced and fair, in particular when it came to the implementation of the deal across all parties. For Iran's part, it rapidly shut down nuclear sites, even going as far as filling the Arak heavy water site with concrete, rendering the plant useless. Iran's Atomic Energy Agency said that Iran had met its commitments under the July nuclear deal earlier than expected, once again proving Tehran's willingness to comply with the terms of the agreement. However, the traffic appeared to be very much a one-way deal, with the promise of a free and open Iranian financial banking on an international scale being hindered by the fake promises of the West to allow Iran to use the SWIFT banking system, which never actually materialized. The West had once again failed to meet its promises, and the world saw once again how false diplomacy ran prevalent in the veins of US and EU diplomats. Yet the situation was soon to be made worse by events across the Atlantic. The surprise election of Donald Trump as the 45th President of the United States brought with it an aggressive Washington foreign policy program, fueled by Zionist regime lobbying and wielding a disruptive power that was soon put into action. On May 8, 2018, Trump signed an executive order withdrawing the US from the JCPOA, labeling the accord as a, quote, horrible one-sided deal, once again demonstrating the lack of commitment by the US over its international agreements and obligations. The reaction by Iran and the remaining members of the JCPOA was mixed, with leading EU states feeling sentiment of regret, as echoed by French President Emmanuel Macron in a tweet, and Iran once again seeing the true face of American double standards. Desperate attempts were made by the EU to disguise the embarrassment of the US withdrawal by launching a barter system known as Instex to help international banking with Iran, whilst avoiding the US banking system and hence bypassing the sanctions imposed once again by Washington. However, the ill-fated system was used only once and it collapsed in 2023 with the EU trying to blame Tehran, yet reality and history once again proved the EU's weakness to stand up to US pressure. Yet once again, Iran showed a willingness to forgive the mistakes and the weakness shown by the EU and the US. With Trump no longer in power, whispers turned louder that the US was once again in a position to rejoin the accord. High-level talks held between Iran and the remaining members of the JCPOA took place in 2022, with US officials alienated from the negotiating table, forced to rely on debriefs from allies, yet once again, unrealistic demand by Washington led to further stalemate, with Iran repeatedly stating it was open to fair and balanced diplomacy. Potential talks could once again be on the table, with China using its influence to persuade talks to resume following its successful brokering of talks between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Speaking of the potential of talks, China's foreign ministry spokesman said the unilateral withdrawal of the United States from the nuclear deal and its so-called maximum pressure campaign against Iran are the cruxes of the current situation vis-a-vis the agreement. With the current status quo still leaving the negotiation rooms empty, Iran has openly stated that a return to all the conditions and agreements written into the JCPOA is still possible on the condition that EU members and the US demonstrates the will to reach such a goal. However, Tehran has also warned that such an opportunity will not last forever, and that is the JCPOA in a nutshell.